RETScreen Expert can also be used with measured performance data from transportation projects. An example of that is included in a built-in portfolio. This portfolio can be accessed from the File worksheet Open page. Clicking on My Portfolio and New, I select Portfolio Example. Within the portfolio, there is an entry for transportation facility type for the on-road vehicles of the CanMet Energy Varennes fleet based in Varennes, Quebec at the Natural Resources Canada facility there. Clicking on that row opens the .retx file for that analysis. It contains a feasibility study very similar to the one we examined in the previous video, but also includes measured distance and fuel consumption data for the fleet. Here I will focus on RETScreen's performance analysis using this measured data. The fleet has changed over time. For each vehicle in the fleet, there is a separate table. These tables were added by clicking on the Transportation button in the menu. You'll see that transportation consumption, to track fuel, and usage are available. When I click on the Consumption option, RETScreen lets me choose which type of transportation fuel consumption I want to track and what fuel is being tracked. This is how RETScreen will be able to aggregate overall fuel consumption, fuel cost, and GHG emissions for whole fleets. These tables have already been created. Clicking on Toyota Prius 1997, for example, shows the fuel consumption and fuel cost for the Prius over the 3-year period 2005 through 2008. Similarly for the 1998 Ford Taurus. In 2008, those vehicles were replaced by a Chevrolet Malibu and a Honda Civic Hybrid. These were in turn replaced in 2012 by a Ford Fusion and a Chevrolet Volt, which were retained throughout the remaining years covered. The Volt is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Its gasoline consumption has been included. If its electricity consumption were available, it could also be included as a separate table through the transportation options under Step 1 Consumption Production. In the province of Quebec, where this facility is located, however, low-emissions hydroelectricity supplies virtually all power, so emissions are nearly entirely due to gasoline consumption. The transportation usage table is the place to collect the data for the distance traveled each year by the fleet, as well as the size of the fleet in number of vehicles. The transportation summary in the data worksheet shows data collected from the fleet for each fiscal year from 2005 through 2020. Each row includes data from a full fiscal year related to the gasoline consumption of all the vehicles in the fleet, the carbon dioxide emissions that result, and the cost of fueling the vehicles. These data are tabulated from all of the vehicle consumption data and the transportation usage table listed in the left-hand pane. I can see how the summary is created by clicking on the Transportation Summary button in the menu, or by right-clicking on the table and selecting Edit Summary. You will see that the fuel types, conversion factors, and GHG emission factors are automatically included, letting RETScreen aggregate and calculate overall consumption, cost, and emissions. If you've ever used RETScreen for utility bill tracking, you'll notice that this is the exact same approach. These summaries provide information to the portfolio, which we will get to in a moment. First, let's briefly go to the Analytics worksheet where we can begin to analyze and graph the data we've collected. Here we have 2 annual bar graphs. One shows the total aggregated annual GHG emissions as well as the baseline and target emissions. Clicking on Format Graph brings up a dialog box which allows us to customize this graph. Now that we have all the data for our fleet and have the transportation summaries, let's return to the portfolio. Looking at the dashboard, there are performance graphics using these data. 2 show the combined fuel consumption and GHG emissions of both the building and the fleet over time, mirroring some of the information we saw in the RETScreen file. While the fuel consumed by the fleet, shown in green, constitutes a small fraction of the facility's overall fuel consumption, including electricity, it accounts for a more significant fraction of the facility's emissions. The third graphic displays emissions for the fleet only. These have fallen significantly over time compared to the reference year of 2005-2006, especially around 2012, when the Volt plug-in hybrid electric vehicle replaced a conventional vehicle burning gasoline. Emissions are around 4 to 5 tons per year for the two vehicles in the fleet. The targeted 40% reduction in emissions by 2025 has been comfortably met in most years, but there is still a long way to go to attain the 2050 target of a 90% reduction in emissions. This may provide some ideas on how RETScreen Expert can be used to track the fuel consumption and emissions arising from a fleet of vehicles.